Good afternoon, everybody. So I don't know much about, or let me put it this way, I'm not an expert on sustainability or on green businesses, but I do know something about consciousness. So what I wanted to do today was to speak about what I've discovered about the evolution of consciousness and how it relates very much to how it's possible to work together in unprecedented ways to do great things. So I think it's relevant. But the first thing I wanted to just bring up as a very brief introduction is that I wanted to just say that there's a very big. Is everybody focused? Okay. Should I have to talk louder? Very good. What I wanted to do as an introduction was basically to speak a little bit about the difference between the impulse to survive and the impulse to evolve. Now, there's a lot of talk these days, not only at this conference, but of course all over the news and in a lot of the conversations we have about the global financial crisis, about global warming, about environmental degradation and overpopulation, all things that we all are all too familiar with. So we know a lot about that. And many of us, understandably, are quite frightened about what we're going to do in order to be able to survive the many crises we're going to face. Very recently, when we were putting together the last issue of Enlightenment magazine that we produced, we interviewed a very bright futurist named John Peterson. And John Peterson was listing about 25 possible scenarios about the worst possible things that were all going to be happening in the next 5 years. So after I listened to the interview that my colleague had conducted with him, I experienced so much terror and so much fear that I felt my perspective began to contract. So emotionally, psychologically, philosophically, and spiritually, my world shrank, my perspective and the way I was seeing things and the way I felt shrunk to the size of a pea. So most of the time, I'm a very turned on, very inspired person. I'm very interested and passionate about the evolution of consciousness and culture. And it's something I speak about all the time, and this is something I live and breathe, and I'm working with people all the time, and I'm really trying to make something very important happen that I'm always excited about. But suddenly what I noticed had happened when after I heard this talk by John Peterson, is I felt my inspiration disappeared, and instead of my familiar and usual aspiration about being very thrilled about our potential to evolve as individuals and as a species, all I could think of was, we don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. And I have students all over the world, and I was thinking, we have to think about how we're going to survive this crisis. And so it took me a few hours to come out of this psychotic state, and because I'm pretty good at being aware of what's happening within my own experience. And so what I saw was that the more frightened and the more intimidated I became about the thought that we might not make it, my interest in higher matters, which is how are we going to evolve as individuals and as a culture. I completely lost touch with my own passion for that, and so what I noticed is that the impulse to survive is very, very different than the impulse to evolve. And it's something very, very important, because many people who are innovators these days, and there are so many brilliant innovators who are coming up with all kinds of the most incredible ways we're going to be able to solve so many of the problems that we're facing, are often doing so from the perspective of how is it that we're going to survive. And sometimes, or maybe not sometimes, or quite often, many of us confuse the impulse to survive with the impulse to evolve. And so just as an introduction, I just wanted to make clear in a few different ways, because it's something very interesting that when you notice that the impulse to survive for human beings is not a new one, that we have been trying to survive and struggling to survive ever since we stood up on two legs, and also before that. So the survival instinct You know, the experience of being in a position where the individual or the group or the tribe or the clan or whoever is being threatened either by another tribe or animals or nature is something that we have been used to responding to forever. So the situation of being faced with an overwhelming threat and coming up with a way to respond to that threat is a human instinct that is very ancient. Whereas the impulse to evolve, the consciously felt, when the impulse to evolve, the desire to evolve or to become more than who and what we already are as individuals and also as a culture, especially when that is actually consciously experienced, because, you know, not all human beings and not every human being experiences what I'm calling the evolutionary impulse. And the evolutionary impulse is simply is a moment when you become aware of a mysterious, ecstatic excitement and ecstatic passion about your own potential to develop to a higher level of cognition, to a higher level of consciousness, and to a higher level of potential, not just because it's going to be a good thing for you as an individual, but for a deeper or higher reason. In other words, there's something intoxicating, deeply thrilling. There is some experience of ecstasy connected to the experience that occurs when we awaken to what I'm calling the evolutionary impulse. And the evolutionary impulse, once again, is that experience of getting in touch with a sense of infinite potential, and inherent in experiencing or becoming aware of this sense of infinite potential is a sense of overwhelming goodness. And there's a sense, it's deeply wholesome, and there's the sense that this is everything, that if I give myself to this impulse to evolve, we get in touch with the best part of ourselves. And this is a big deal. So I want to speak a little bit, I want to speak a lot more about this particular impulse because it's something that not that many people are actually speaking about. And I want to speak about it in such a way that I want to make clear to everybody that if we discover this impulse and we harness it, we're gonna find a way to work together to do all the most important things we want to do in ways that would not be possible otherwise. But I just wanted to start by just making clear that the impulse to survive, the survival impulse, is common to the human experience and also common to the experience of most animals. But the impulse to evolve, the consciously felt, the consciously cognized impulse to evolve, to become more, deeper, higher, is a very recently emergent impulse in the human experience. That happens to be a very interesting fact. But even now that it is beginning to emerge, you also have to realize that a lot of human beings don't experience an evolutionary impulse. I'm sure you know a lot of people that are not inspired to change for deeper, profound reasons. And even many people who are inspired to change are often inspired to change in ways that are very small-minded and self-centered. It's an uncommon thing for an individual to be driven by a force of nature, which is really, as I describe it and understand it, which is one with and synonymous with the energy and intelligence that created the universe, which is what I want to speak about now. But once again, just remember that this evolutionary impulse is really a new thing, and that in the face of all the understandable fear and terror that we face, because we face so many crises, it's important that we don't lose touch with the big picture.